Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured, why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description, to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say, I'm watching so-and-so show. And then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it. And that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 4 of FX and Hulu's A Murder at the End of the World, entitled Family Secrets. Well, I don't think I need to do too much explaining with the title here. Often I'll kind of be looking for clues in the episode about why it's named what it's named, and I spent the entirety of this episode going back to the title like, what the fuck is this about? Why does it have this name? Well, we find out at the end of the episode why it has that name. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later because I really enjoyed this episode and I thought the reveal itself was great. I didn't see it coming at all. I was totally blindsided by that, but I absolutely hated how they did it. So there's a little bit of a tease for you for later. So my plan was to split coverage of this show each week into two halves, talking about the present day storyline and then talking about the Silver Doe flashback one. And I am going to structure the show that way. But this won't be split in half because we spend the majority of our time in the present day. And so that's how I'm going to structure this video. We're going to talk about the present day for the majority of the video. We're going to have a little bit of Silver Doe flashback divergence at the end. And then we're going to come back around to the ending. So present day, the episode picks up where we left off last week with everyone being sent 6 stories underground for safety while Andy and his team secure the facility. Of course, everyone starts conversing about what happened, and someone says it looked like Rohan had a heart attack. Darby immediately proves me right from last week when I said that Rohan's pacemaker was absolutely going to be important. I didn't know it was going to be important so quickly, but it was. She says that any pacemaker made after 2011 would have a wireless interface, and they eventually landed a place where they agree that Rohan's pacemaker was probably hacked. Now, I think this is a good point to talk about a prevailing theory as it pertains to this show. It crossed my mind watching it. I kind of dismissed it because it felt kind of obvious to me, but I think a version of this theory is still very much on the table. So one of you in the comments, I actually wrote down the username for once. So if you're watching this, shout out to you, Mana3895. She mentioned the theory that the AI Ray is behind the murders. I've seen that theory around. Like I said, I entertained it myself. I'm not gonna say I dismissed it. It's like I said, I'm gonna explain. It's on the table, but I don't know. I kind of thought like that feels kind of obvious. But the idea that Rohan's pacemaker was hacked leans really hard into the Ray theory, but it doesn't explain how Ray would have gotten to Bill since Bill was injected with morphine. And they also explain in this scene just how Rohan's pacemaker would be hacked, and they said you have to modify a pacemaker home monitor system. But then one of the people in the room, more later also on the struggle to learn who the fuck everybody is, but one of the people in the room says that they have a pacemaker home monitor system right there on the premises, and furthermore, it's usually in a cabinet, but she found it outside of the cabinet and on that morning, the morning of Rohan's death. Ray just the AI, y'all. Like he can open doors, like literally open doors and take pacemaker home monitor systems out of cabinets and turn them on. Like, and he also can inject people with morphine. So if it is Ray, and I think that Ray being involved is still probably the best theory that's out there right now, he would still need human help. So I think we need to still consider some sort of human assistance if we're going to go with the Ray theory. And actually, before I continue the plot stuff, I actually am going to talk about the too many characters thing now, because there's too many fucking characters. Like, they're constantly dropping the names of people, and I'm just like, who the fuck is that? And I feel like that's a problem 4 episodes in. I feel like I should recognize the names by now. But on the other hand, at the same time, I acknowledge that these like whodunit type shows, they can be like that because they tend to want to highlight someone in each episode. So they'll kind of like, you'll have your cast of 6 or 7. And I talked about this in my video for the first episode. You'll have these casts of 6 or 7, and you'll see them now and then. You might hear their names, but you don't really learn anything about any of them until the show wants you to when they highlight that character in an episode. See Only Murders in the Building for an example of that. So even though I may hear a name and not know who it is, there's a strong likelihood that that person will become a focal point later, and I get that. I understand. I just don't like constantly not knowing the names of the characters when, this show has such a large cast between the main people who are invited to the hotel and the staff that works there and the staff that works for Andy. And if they're not name dropping someone I can't put a face to, they're showing me a face a lot and then not naming the person. And it's just kind of frustrating. I feel like I'm like not connecting names to faces. Like, I'm recognizing all the faces, I'm hearing some of the same names, but I don't know which name goes to which face. Like, there's one guy in particular who they keep showing looking sinister all the time in the first 3 episodes, and he was hardly ever named. And he had a brief interaction with Darby, a sinister one, in episode 3. And then in the beginning of this episode, they again show him looking sinister, and he says to Todd, that's his name, right? The fucking, like, assistant waiter guy or whatever. He's like, I get it. You think you're protecting Andy from us. And I was like, holy shit, thanks. Closed captioning. Now I know who this guy is because it said David, I know what you think. You think you're protecting Andy from us. So I'm like, cool, now I know this guy's name is David. But my point is that I've seen David looking at Darby suspiciously throughout the entire show, and it was just beginning to vex me that I didn't know this guy's name. So another aspect of this kind of this conversational scene around this table at the beginning of the episode that I liked was how realistic the dialogue was. And I'm about to say some inflammatory shit. I promise you I don't mean it this way. And I'm going to explain myself. Trust me, I don't just say inflammatory shit just to say it. But when Darby suggests she should look at the body, Rohan's body, since the police won't be there for 48 to 72 hours, David and this other guy, Maris, I don't know, he's always dressed like a fucking butler. I don't know. He's the bellhop for the hotel. I don't know. Andy's assistant. I don't know. They both treat Darby's suggestion like the stupid fucking suggestion that it is, and I really appreciated that. Like, David goes, fucking millennials, and Maris is like, no one's touching anybody. This isn't Lord of the Goddamn Flies, which I thought was a really great line. And yeah, Darby, she's not a millennial, but that presumption that she's fit to examine a dead body because she's a self-appointed detective is right in line with her generation's mindset. And I'm not trying to shit on her generation either. Like, I'm truly just trying to speak to the authenticity of the dialogue because that's something that has always stood out to me. That ridiculous suggestion authentically felt like something someone of her age would suggest and believe to be a perfectly reasonable thing to say. And those responses that she got from David and Maris are how people of common sense at those ages would respond to some stupid fucking suggestion like that. And I really dug that. And look, I'm not trying to sound like an old fogey despite using the term old fogey, but it is true that people foolishly think that what they do or learn on the internet can be translated into real life. Like, they think they're experts in shit. And Darby really undermines, I think, her intelligence with that suggestion and underlines the arrogance of her generation with it. Like, to suggest that it's okay to tamper with a crime scene because you're a crime scene enthusiast? Like, I don't know. I don't buy that, Darby. I don't think that's cool. But I digress. And so once they get the hotel secured, they take everyone's electronics. Did I say taked? They they took everyone's electronics and sent them to their rooms without supper. And I loved watching Darby kind of like suspiciously eye fuck everybody she walks past during this sequence. But I'm also kind of torn on how I feel about Darby's eye fucking as well. Like, on one hand, it's funny to me, and maybe some of you don't even notice it. But on the other hand, when I talk about people having realistic reactions to things, I feel like no one has reacted realistically to how Darby be looking at him. Like, there have been several times where the proper human reaction to the way Darby is looking at you is, yo, you got a fucking problem, Darby. Like, that's the proper reaction. And I don't know why she just stares at people like this and like no one checks her on it. But anyway, once Darby hands over her mountain of electronics, Sean appears at her patio door. And Darby does this quick test to confirm whether or not Sean is a hacker, and then completely trust her with no questions whatsoever for the remainder of the episode. And I think that's my other problem with Darby. She overshares. Like, you can't suspiciously eye fuck people and overshare everything you're doing and everything that you've learned. It's like she's trying to get herself killed. Like, you're antagonizing people and you're sharing everything. It's too much. Also, can we talk about how the security at this hotel is top of the fucking line, except for the patio doors? Like, it's not much of a lockdown if you can just slide that big ass glass door open and walk the fuck out. Like, it's almost like they want to encourage people to move back and forth between rooms through the patios. Just saying. Like, if you were Ray and you had a human assistant who you needed to covertly move from room to room. Just saying. Where was I? So Sean apologizes for not backing Darby when she suggested that Bill's death was foul play, and says that she can help her get a look at Rohan's body. Once they find the body, Darby finds that signaling device thing that he was using to do the Morse code in the middle of the night. She finds it in his pocket. And Sean immediately recognized it as a signaling device, which struck me as odd. But I guess that was only me. Darby didn't really react to it. Darby then tells Sean every single thing about following Rohan that night. She's like, yeah, so I snuck out. I followed him. He went up to the top of the mountain. He was doing Morse code. He said this. Like, okay, I'm like, Darby, can you please shut the fuck up and keep some of this vital information to yourself? But, she trusts Sean with that information way too easily, and she consistently says too much, too quickly, and too early, and I don't know. She's very reckless with who she gives information to. So Sean and Darby decide to go to that location, and they intend on making it there and back in 3 hours before this superstorm hits. And they have a snowmobile and some fancy spacesuits that Andy had custom made for apocalyptic conditions. And there's a lot of great shots in this sequence. I'm not going to highlight everyone, but like of them like leaving the hotel grounds and then like traversing the Iceland tundra. Lots of great shots there. So they make it to the same location, and Darby signals SOS with the little thing. And then they head down to a body of water, which again, strangely, Sean is like, I think we need to go there. And I'm like, okay, why? Like, what? Like, I was thinking that they were going to do the signal and they were expecting someone to signal back. But they don't. They go down. They head to this body of water, and they find something called a Zodiac. This is the first time I've ever heard the term Zodiac used in this context. I've heard of the Zodiac Killer. I've heard of Zodiac signs. I've never heard of Zodiac boats, but it's a small inflatable boat that's used to get to another big boat that's too big to dock at a shore. And this Zodiac that they find in the water tied to a rope apparently belonged to a boat that belongs to Rohan. During this time, we learned that David would have had a problem with Lee because Zoomer distracted Andy from him. I don't know what I'm supposed to glean from that, but it was said and it felt important. So I don't know, something that could be motivation for if they want to highlight David at some point as someone who's a suspect. Maybe they could use that as motivation, some sort of jealousy that he might have or whatever. But I don't know. It was mentioned and it sounded important. But we also learned that Sean's father committed suicide when she was 13. And again, I don't know if that's going to matter either. But it felt important. It could have just been meant to let us get a more three-dimensional view of her character. But I don't know, it was mentioned that it seemed important. That's not a thing where I'm like, oh, that's gonna matter later. I'm not willing to make that bet on either of those things. So on their way back, the snow's quickly approaching and the snowmobile stalls, so they gotta walk. They come across a guard shack and an unlocked truck. That was convenient. Once they get, and also, where was what happened in that scenario? Was the guard in the guard shack and didn't know that they were there still in the truck? Did the guard leave on foot? And left the truck unlocked? Whatever. But once they get in the truck, the show makes it a point to show us them taking their helmets off and placing them in the back seat. More on that in a moment. So Sean hacks the car, proving that she does know hacks despite passing Darby's little test early in the episode. And then while doing some of the worst driving on ice that any human could possibly do, Sean reveals that Andy has drained funds from a space program for something else. And again, I don't know what that's going to mean, but I'm pretty sure we should be making note of that. Sounds like, another thing for motive. And they've given Andy a lot of motive. So again, Sean's driving about as poorly as anybody with 2 functioning arms can drive. So of course they crash. And it was almost impressive how little Darby was reacting relative to how poorly Sean was driving. That was not much of a reaction for someone who appears to actively be trying to kill you by shitty driving. I'd have been really fucking reacting. But I digress. So reminder, both helmets were on the back seat. When we return to this scene after the crash, Darby's being pulled through the snow unconscious with no helmet, and Sean is wearing a helmet. When Darby wakes up, she's given morphine, which is an obvious concern given what happened to Bill, and Sean's helmet is sealed and won't come off, leaving her with only 2 minutes of oxygen before she suffocates. They try to get the helmet off in a number of ways, none of which work, and they got to do an emergency tracheotomy on her so that she can breathe, and it works. She doesn't die. We learn the next morning that she's in her room recovering. But we're all in agreement that sealed helmet was meant for Darby, right? The fact that they emphasized showing each helmet being placed on the back seat was a clue to pay attention to the helmets. And if one was meant for Darby and they got mixed up in the accident, it's conceivable that Sean could have put on one that was meant for Darby. And if it were meant for Sean, I don't think they saved the character and let her live anyway. So the fact that the show had the chance to kill Sean and didn't, coupled with the conspicuous helmet shot, really makes me think that there's got to be some helmet mix-up involved in this situation. My gut says that the helmet was meant for Darby, but it could have been a thing where just I don't know. The conspicuous helmet shot matters, and then you give it to a fact that the truck rolled, which is meant to let us know the helmets got jostled. I feel like I feel like the wrong helmet was put on, but I also feel like if Ray can control getting that helmet on and off, and that helmet was actually meant for Darby, why did he not take it off then? Why was Sean allowed to live? But maybe that was what was intended. Maybe he wanted to kill Sean. And they were just able to save her. I don't know. But whatever the case may be, the helmet was a key. And I think the putting them on the back seat and then having the car roll over, I think that was meant to convey, or we're supposed to be looking back and going, there was probably a helmet mix-up. Now, for obvious reasons, before I talk about the very last scene, I need to talk about the Silver Doe flashback scenes first. So, we don't hit those flashback scenes until past the midway point of the episode, but Darby and Bill have successfully used that pen from last week to ID a body, and I just want to say it was wild to me, the level of access that these two citizens off the street continue to get in these Silver Doe flashback scenes. But they, of course, conveniently, again, find another silver item, a ring, on this person's personal effects, and the ring says E. Bell on it. This is obviously meant to drive the narrative to the next location, as we also set up the likely confrontation with the killer when Darby suggests this item likely belonged to his first victim. As they head outdoors, Bill sneezes and explains that he has a condition called Achoo. It's an acronym that makes him sneeze when moving from dark to light. He says it's a real thing, says it's genetic, says his dad had it. And I put in my notes during that scene while I was watching, oh, that's definitely going to come back around. I had no idea how soon. They're looking for a place to sleep, and they go to a motel with... go to a motel that has a bunch of Chevrolet logos on it. They run some scam to get a room that a couple, like an elderly couple, they just left out of that Darby says is brilliant, and I have no idea how the fuck that worked, but whatever. You kind of write off a lot of shit with this show. Like they do good with the shit that matters, but like the little shit, I feel like you gotta just be like, whatever. But and then also those gotta be the same sheets that the old people slept on, right? Like gross. Darby actually tries to give Bill some, and they start making out, but he stops, and she is just absolutely. She's like looking at him like mouth hanging open, like the fuck. Like, I don't know a bigger insult to a woman than for her to decide she gonna give you something you like, nah, I'm good. Man, that's gotta be completely soul crushing. But eventually they do have sex, and this transitions back into our present day scenes where Darby was getting dragged through the snow. And after the whole situation with Sean's helmet, Darby wakes up the next day with Zoomer yet again inexplicably in her room. Like, I don't know why Lee keeps leaving her child with this young woman, but she leaves Zoomer in there, and as Darby opens the curtains to let in the sunlight, Zoomer immediately sneezed, and I went, yo, that was sweet. That was a sweet fucking reveal. And then the show completely shit over it by treating me like a fucking moron and having the kid explain the whole thing. Like, I got a disease called Achu. It stands for blah, 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 blah. Man, I'm like, yo, fuck you for this, dog. I was so mad. Like, that reveal was dope as fuck when you treated me like a smart viewer. Like, you set it up perfectly. This is a show meant for viewers who pay the fuck attention to what you're watching. And again, you set it up perfectly. You executed it perfectly. You should have had the sneeze, had Darby spin around with a surprise face, and then went to the fucking credits. And it would have been a fucking slam dunk. But no, you went one step too far and were like, just in case our audience is too fucking stupid to get everything that we perfectly set up, let's hold their hands and walk up through the reveal that we just did. And man, I was fucking pissed. I'm still clearly pissed right now, and I watched it like 6 hours ago. But like, man, it was a shitty ending to a great episode that wouldn't have had the shitty ending asterisk if they had just ended the episode one sentence sooner. Like, man, fucking sucks. Anyway, I did love this episode, and the reveal in and of itself was still really good. I was completely blindsided by that, and I mean, shit, like that changes the game. So let me know what you thought in the comments, and I will see you guys next week for episode 5, and until then, peace.